And then we also have 4 elections next year. With the statewide, or so the presidential primary, along with the statewide Supreme Court race, and any local nonpartisan seats are all on the ballot on April 7th. That primary is in February 18th. So we got February 18th. March 12th is the self-survey that starts for the census. April 7th is the spring election. Whew, we haven't even got to the summer yet. We've got a lot of democracy happening. Then of course the August primary for the fall, and then we have the November election. So there's a lot of participation things going on. Plus, we're all here to talk about, to figure out the campaign to get fairer maps in 2021, right? So all of this gears towards the next March of 2021. So fast forward, we all did a lot of voting, a lot of census participation, a lot of activism around the goals of the campaign. And then the Census Bureau comes back with the data and hands it over to the state, and says, here, this is the data set that you need to draw the maps from. So in our state, the majority party of the legislature gets the first crack at it, right? That's kind of the part of the problem, right? Am I right? Okay. So I just want to put a quick plug in for another piece of things just to plant the seed. So we're talking, a lot of the stuff that gerrymandering we're talking about, there's a couple different flavors of gerrymandering. A lot of the stuff we talk about is around partisan gerrymandering, really the partisanship that's like knowing where the D's and the R's are and really like rigging that around partisanship has been the big theme, and that was what the Supreme Court case was about. But there's a couple other pieces of gerrymandering you got to keep in mind. Racial gerrymandering, trying to dissipate the power of communities of color and saying, oh, let's just get one local, and this really affects local seats, school districts and counties, and even at the state level. Racial gerrymandering, how to do that, there's the US Constitution actually talks about that too. And then we also have prison gerrymandering. Who knows about that? Hey, okay, tell us what that is. What's your name?
I'm sorry, I'm Jerry.
Hey, Jerry.
Hi. The process of sort of drawing prisons into specific districts so that the prison population counts toward a district, and obviously they're unable to vote.
Yeah.
And so you can sort of pack numbers into a district to get fundings.
Yeah.
You know,
there's like a county district in Jefferson, a county seat, a county supervisor seat in Jefferson County that is 80% of the people that are in prison, right? So, and that, you know, and then there's a few state legislative seats where it's like a third of the folks don't get a voice, which is a whole nother thing. Some states, you don't lose your constitutional right if you make a mistake. So I just want to plant that seed that we should think about, reorganize our minds of what society has told us about criminals and if they should still have rights, okay? And so I just want to plant the seed. We don't have to be taking away people's constitutional rights. And in the meantime, 4 other states don't have the practice of prison gerrymandering, and it's actually a data problem. When the census brings back and hands the legislature all the data set from the new census, 4 of the states take that and they say, oh, actually, before you do that, we're going to just take the home addresses from the Department of Corrections, and we're just going to adjust the data set, because people aren't represented at those prisons, but they are more represented by where they're actually from. And all we need to do is adjust the data set. And in Wisconsin, it's about 55 to 60,000 people. That would be adjusted data set. And now we hand that adjusted data set to the legislators, or to ideally the nonpartisan map drawing commission, right? And there you go. Prison gerrymandering is as good as done. So that's my plug. That was not even what we're doing today. That's just knowledge I'm dropping on you for fun. But I just want to plant these things in our seeds, because I actually think in an ideal world, our governor would be taking on prison gerrymandering in an executive order and take on that fight, knowing it would be a fight. The legislature, I'm sure, would throw a lawsuit on, but I believe our Constitution is supportive of that practice based on how we talk about, how the Constitution talks about the population. So I just want to plant that seed, that part of this fight around gerrymandering is knowing some of these pieces of how people are counted and shown up in this process, and we have some adjustments to do outside of just partisan gerrymandering, but some of these are connected. Any questions before I even get started? Yeah? Okay. So then we're going to get to the meat of it. I'm going to talk about how I believe we're going to win this campaign, what it looks like, what winning looks like in 2020, what winning looks like in 2021, and I think the real win will happen like 2023. So take a deep breath, because we're in this. You have a mad face on already. You're like, I didn't sign up for a 4-year operation.
I don't want to wait till 2023.
I don't want to wait either. And maybe we can do things sooner but we're going to need a lot of folks. Okay, then we're gonna just practice, and I'm going to not be talking for most of the time, so that's exciting. So super quickly, who I am. I grew up on a dairy farm about half an hour from here, outside of Athens, Wisconsin. It's and we milked about 60 Holstein cows. Here I am. I kind of look like my little daughter. You can see her. We don't have calves anymore. I live in Milwaukee, and I try to get her eating as much dirt as possible to expose her to the elements. So what I love about the organization I run, it's Wisconsin Voices. We unify and coordinate about 65 progressive nonprofits. All under the banner of making sure, like it's environmental groups, it's gun violence groups, it's people who are working on police brutality, it's people who are working on clean water and climate action, it's reproductive justice rights. It's a lot of groups that are led by and serve communities of color and young people and important rural constituencies. So we range from Planned Parenthood to the Farmers Union to Wisconsin Anti-Violence Collective to a small organization called Clean Slate. And what we do is we say, look, kind of like what we said earlier, all your issues matter, but in order for that platform to move forward, we need a strong democracy. So we work on policies. We actually just hired Carlene as our Fair Maps organizer. Yay, who's not here, but she's been speaking up front. And then we also really work on coordinating around the engagement in democracy. So we do a ton on voter registration, photo ID assistance, getting people out to vote. We really focus on unlikely and new voters, trying to revolutionize the electorate. So our goal in 2020 is to add 100,000 new voters to the table that no other program or campaign would be touching. So I'm going to talk and then we support different, what we call just tactics. So they're pieces of that puzzle, activities that are coordinate and robust of a bunch of the organizations to do that, right? So what I think is, for me, growing up on a farm, it's like, my dad mostly, and my mom was a school teacher, but as a farmer, it's like my dad did a lot of work by himself, right? And a pretty independent guy, but when there were big things that had to happen, when the hay had to get off in one afternoon, he couldn't do that by himself. When we didn't have to raise a barn when I was them, but when they had to raise a barn, you brought your neighbors and friends together to do something bigger, right? And so that's how I think about our organization is we have these really important organizations that are independently fighting and advocating for amazing groups and individuals that are really working hard in their local. But if we're gonna figure out democracy, it's a barn builder. We have to come together around and raise different parts of this state and different constituencies and different flavors to actually get something way bigger than ourselves. So it's like we have to be greater than the sum of our parts. And so that's my parallel to farming and the work we do now to make a stronger democracy in Wisconsin. Okay, so I'm talking about relational organizing. Again, communities have been doing this for decades, centuries. It's basically your network is your friend and family. It's like what do they call it when the phone tree. It's basically this, right? So, but what we've done in the last year or two is taking groups in Wisconsin and trying to electoralize that. And so, one way we think about it is an organizer recruits leaders. There can be tiers of leadership. And those leaders have an important job. They need to name a group of people that they are committed to talking to. And talking to them intentionally, with gravitas, and emotionally, and powerfully. And so we call them action takers and voters. This is another way to think about it. And I'm going to go over this in a second, but I have a quiz for you. This is actually, I just added this slide in from this morning. If you were paying attention to Josh, the first guy who spoke with the Macaulay Culkin images, yeah. He put up a percentage and it was based on a Harvard study of movements over time, massive people movements that have been successful. How many people how many people do we need to consistently show up for this movement? What percentage of the population?
3.5.
3.5. Oh, you guys are listening. Yes. So who knows how many people in Wisconsin that is? How many people are in Wisconsin total? According to the last census, which by the way, was only 81% of people filled out the census. But I have to say, we were the #1 state. So we got to keep our #1 status, but ideally the percentage goes up. So roughly about 5.5 million, give or take, hundreds of thousands that didn't fill out the census. It's about 200,000 people. Can we do it? Can we get 200,000 people to show up to end gerrymandering over the next 4 years?
Yes.
Yeah? Yeah, cool. Well, we're gonna work on the first 15,000 today. And that should be low-hanging fruit, right? Yeah? So maybe we should add some zeros behind these goals. And I put that up there, I'm like, we can do this. So here's our plan. And I just want to give that in mind. We're shooting for 3.5% of the state to consistently show up for this movement around a stronger democracy, with the core of it being fair maps. Yeah? Who's with me? Who thinks that's a good plan? Breaking down this, we can break this down. This is how I'm breaking it down. 1, I hired Carlene last week. I did my part. Y'all are yes. Okay. 2. Okay. I have to stop. We were strategizing. We had like leaders. What's another? Okay, leaders, voters, and we were like, how do we make this a little bit more central to like branded on fair maps? And Lisa in our office was like, well, you know what? People who are supporting fair maps and fair lines, why don't we call them linebackers? And who's like a famous Packer linebacker? Yeah, that guy. I didn't stop watching when I had children, also Colin Kaepernick, and then I'm coming back because they're winning. It's just like I'm a bad Packer fan. I'm a little bit like only like to watch them win. So anyway, so linebackers, you following me? This is a pun. We're gonna go with it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No veto to the too sportsy. Okay. So we're shooting for 15,000 linebackers. That means people who support the supporters. Someone who would take an action on fair maps. Okay? So let's reverse engineer from there. So like team captains, that's folks who are willing to make a list of 20 people. Maybe you start them out with 5. But up to 30 people, like that you're really in charge of it. And your big thing is, I will commit to being the phone tree to these folks on calls to action that need to happen. Filling out your census and voting are processes that matter to this. They're not the process, because we also need people to like above and beyond really agitate, educate, and activate on this campaign around fair maps. So, but that's what a team captain is. They have they're a leader with their, and by leader it's like they're willing to call the people in their friends, family, maybe it's their neighbors, to take action. And then we think we are going to need another level of support, because a big theme that you'll see is because of gerrymandering, but not only because of that, we have a disproportionate amount of people who are taking action on this campaign. A lot of folks from Madison especially, and it's not spread out to all the spaces that we need it. You know, we have 5 Republicans that are signed on to our bill. Okay, where do we get the next 5?
The next 5 most competitive districts.
So we're going to talk about that. But it's probably, it doesn't always line up where we have robust teams of leaders. Yet, we're going to change that. Coaches are going to be above and beyond and recruit, talk to their own friends and family, but also recruit and support captains in targeted areas and support some of the statewide activities. And get creative. I feel like we need some leaders that are going to, like Katie Fahey was like, had 18 quilters that put together gerrymandering quilts. I was like, no pressure, but my mom's a retired teacher and she's an amazing quilter. And I'm like, we're gonna need to get on that. And there's other stuff like that, right? We have to get creative and like, how do we elevate this to the next level? Who has questions on this? Who's like, these numbers aren't enough, what's going on? Or these are way too many, or this is not what we need to be here for.
So how many of each? How many coaches, how many team captains?
Well, I'm hoping for, and this is like this is what I'm hoping is, gosh, I don't even know the deadline. I'm thinking by the end of 2020, but I think we could do this by April. Because I think we're getting close already. So my goal is about 10 coaches per congressional district. It's kind of how we've been breaking it up. And then each of those areas, we'd like, team captains, we'd like 100 per congressional district, so about 800 leaders statewide. And then each of those team captains would have 20 to 30 linebackers or supporters, friends and family that will pick up your phone call. So that is, we're shooting for 15,000 action takers by the spring. Yeah? How's that feel? How's that sit with people? Yes, no, Charlie.
I just sort of emphasize the point. Relationships matter.
Yeah.
And I've been involved in a lot of campaigns over a lot of years. And I have 3,200 names for the Oregon School District of people, almost every one of them I've talked to over a couple decades. And,
They still talk to you?
Ann Peterson has a dog named Charlie.
Yeah.
But, you know, it really makes a difference when you're talking to somebody to have a connection with them rather than just somebody you've never seen before or unlikely to see again. And so it really one of the things we're trying to do is encourage people to adopt the turf and make it their own, not just for one election, but continuing elections.
Charlie, you are a coach already. Coaching to the next thing. So does everyone have,
Wait, can I just ask a question?
yeah, what's your name?
Yeah.
Donna.
Okay. So are you actually saying this is going to be a call to action over the phone from top down, and if you're a coach, you call your linebackers? And so when something comes up and we need to call the congressman, the assemblyman, or the senator, or write a letter to the governor, whatever, then those calls come down through, and then you're responsible for your training?
Yes. How's that feel?
Well, I tell you, I think it feels, I don't know if I have 20 or 30 people.
Sure.
for my
I know it's a little aggressive, but you all the do-gooders, right? You showed up today, some.
But the thing is, I think it would be a lot more effective than call canvassing numbers from the phone.
Can I just, what was your name? Donna. And she said, I think this might be more effective than strangers knocking on strangers' door.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, this is, and it's been tested, it's 10 times more effective than other forms of talking to voters. And just when we talk about the electoral stuff, because we're going to activate your friends and family and are in this larger network for a lot of things. Voting is a process, it's not the process, right? So it's important. Thank you. So it is 10 times more. Why do you think this might be more effective? Why is it when my mom calls her neighbor, why might that be more effective than someone from Marathon County Dems knocking on that door?
Trusted source.
Trusted?
Trusted
They'll
source.
actually answer the door, right?
Yeah.
They might pick up your phone call because it's saved in your phone, right? They might think she's calling to like borrow some flowers or something, but aha, I got you. This is, but, and what else?
They'll want to tell her they did it, that you made a difference.
There's accountability.
They'll want to give her that.
It's not a one-time transaction. My mom is going to stay the neighbor to her, neighbor. Like they're going to see each other. There's accountability. This is human connection, and that's how our brains are wired. Is like people we trust, social connections. What else? What else?
There's an expression that you have to make a friend before you make a sale, something like that.
And what does that mean? What is a friend? What is a friendship?
It's a relationship.
Yeah, and a relationship is like, we like to think that we're logical, rational humans. But guess what? Most of the decisions we make and most of the political decisions that are made are emotional. We are mostly emotions, and that's like our unconscious brain is wired to like have emotional shorthands. So stereotypes are strong because they're wired and they're emotional, right? And so it's like to either cut past what we already have our brains wired, you have to get, and also sexy, if you want, that's what they just say about, it's like something that actually really sticks out to you is like, it pulls at your actual heartstrings. I can talk, I'm as progressive as they'll get, right? But I can talk to my neighbor who has a sign in their yard that says, "We back the badge." But I talk to them every single day. That doesn't mean that they don't think that my child's life matters, right? People, and they say there's liberal and there's conservative. There's moderates. I actually don't like to, I say there's not moderates, there's a lot of people who are conflicted. They have a lot of different values. They have progressive values, they also have conservative values. They have independent values. They have, you know, it's like they want to be good people. They also they have prejudices too, like most of us, right? So how do we draw upon what we can connect with them on? How do we lift that part up? That's the other thing, is like, that's what making a friend is drawing on the connection. Are you all with me? Okay, so we got, now's the handout time. Now's personal reflection time. Who's got this sheet of paper? Everyone needs this sheet of paper. It says fair maps, linebacker list. Does everyone have that?
No. All these?
It just says fair map, linebacker list. Yeah, how do we get that everywhere? Raise your hand if you don't have that. Okay, this whole crew over here.
You can have all of them.
All right.
Well, we already have one. All right. I guess you and I were.
Have you got one?
Okay, so if I was in a, I want you to sit down and think about who are the people that you can call. All right, and I need you to make a list, and I want you to start. And if your list, I want to challenge you to think about a network that's broader than you think. Here's what I do. I take out my phone, and I think about, it's pretty simple what I do. I look at the last 30 people who sent a text message to me. That's it, you can start there. People in your contact list that you already know are in communication with you. Some of them seem obvious, like, yeah, of course, my husband, okay. But that's an easy one. Friends and family. Some people will be out of the state. We do want to stick to people who are in the state. No pressure, but the fate of a lot of people's lives in 2020 are on Wisconsin voters. Y'all know that we're in a very important city, or state. Y'all know that? No pressure, but life or death here. So I want you to think about this. Yeah.
So if I could easily right now put down 20 people who live in the Madison area, and we could all call,
Tammy Balls.
Yeah.
Urbanbach or Sandy Pope Roberts, and we already know how they would vote.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
like,
Couple
is
things.
my 20 really worth that much?
Well, a couple of things. Don't assume. I just want to do a couple of things on assumptions. Let's not assume everyone votes in the local elections, and especially this state Supreme Court election on April 7th, and it's obviously the presidential primary. Who always votes in spring elections here? Okay, everyone's gonna raise their hand. But y'all are weird / exceptional, all right? We are here because we are weird, and that is cool, we're embracing that. But let's not assume everyone that we've talked to is as exceptional as us or weird. You can, strengths are weakness, right? So one is don't assume, especially on thinking about the participation in voting in the spring election. Now I know that doesn't matter, but I think, are there other folks who, can you diversify geographically or other ways? Are there other people, maybe not the first 20, but the second 20 that might be, I don't know, a young family that lives next to you, or someone that works with you, just a little bit off your beaten path, a little bit, but like actually does know you and has a different connection. Personally, I'm thinking about the teachers at my kids' childcare. I talk to them every single day. They, see me breastfeed my child every single day. We talk every single day, but I know I could bridge the conversation. I never have around politics. I never have around what gerrymandering is. But I do have access to see if they voted, and they haven't. They're not voters. So, at least the last teacher. So that's an example for me of someone that I actually interact with today, but I never think to have this conversation. The conversation we're practicing. Charlie.
Part of the concern I have is that I found we often spend a lot of time talking to ourselves. That is people who already agree with us. Mm-hmm. I've been trying to practice talking to strangers.
Sure.
More in terms of reaching the one that's supposed to be talking. Are you registered? Just to try to start a conversation. I think part of the frustration living in Dane County in particular is recognizing that most of the change in terms of changing the landscape has to occur outside our immediate area of familiarity in terms of, again, finding ways in which you can reach out to and talk to people we don't.
The
know.
Dane County Conundrum.
Things
I know,
that
I hear
people don't
you.
normally
Well, let's talk
hear.
about maximizing your impact as coaches, right? But for this, I want you all to think about, I hear you, and we can go deeper. Right now, I'm asking everyone here to be team captains. What I'm hearing you, some folks are ready to do this. I'm hearing there's a willingness and a readiness. Some people who organized this event today, they're already ready to like strategically increase our capacity in places that are outside of where we live, right? So we're gonna have a plan on that. Can you hold tight on that? All right. So I'm gonna put a timer on. The first person to get 30 wins a pint of maple syrup from my family's farm that I didn't bring and I will mail to you. I just thought of incentives, competitive incentives. That's what would get me going. First person to 30, Mom, you don't count. You get something else. But yeah. Think about your holiday card list. Think about who owes you a favor. Who do you run into at the grocery store? Think about family that's in different parts of the state. Pull out your phone. I want everyone to get to at least 5. Is there anyone like on the fence about this as an activity outside of I want to expand my capacity outside of where I live?
I have a question.
Yeah.
On here it says who would likely take action on paramedics.
Interesting.
Or anybody that we want to put to contact and try to work
Yeah.
this a little bit. So that's my question, I guess.
Is it? What if you're like I don't think they'll likely do it?
Right.
Is that your gut is like?
Well,
80% of people agree with this. So I would say there are a few hardcore, like, if you know Robin Voss personally, you should put him on there for different reasons, but he's general gerrymander in my book, right? In this particular context. But we should really we need to talk to everyone and let's really try and take away our assumptions in terms of, let's take away assumptions on partisanship. Let's take away assumptions on where you think they fall on a conservative to progressive standpoint. Also, level of activity. If you know they're just never been engaged in politics, let's just take away those assumptions. And we're going to practice conversations. And so put those people down that you're thinking, and let's just we're going to try on a conversation as soon as the time is done.
Thank you.
You got a fan.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know. And Mary, when do we end here? Is it 2 or 2:50? 2. Make sure we're not over time. Most important thing is to write down their first and last name and their city or county. So if you don't have their number with you, that's okay, but put it down if you have it, but that's the most important thing is the legible first and last name and county. What we want to do is we do track this, but not to track your people. We don't actually do it to that. We want to support you in having that conversation and following back up. So we're gonna work to support you to follow back up. So what's really most important? Just first and last name and city or county.
So you're getting these.
Yeah, Carlene will. We'll make sure you have this list though. Right, Octavia? Yes. Is it too quiet in here, sweetie? Okay, we got 2 more minutes left. Anyone shout out an idea of a good person or someone that came to mind that you're like, yes, this is a good person, a good idea.
Trina.
Who's Trina?
She's my friend and she calls her representatives every week.
So she's, you know what, I know Trina personally, and I will tell you, Trina is already at this, she's not just a linebacker, you could probably recruit her to be a team captain or a coach. So, anyone else have someone in mind that's like, either yes, they'll take action, or you know what? I could maybe motivate them to, down the line to take action. Anyone have a person? Someone on your list you want to share? One more minute.
Sorry.
So just so you know, one thing, what we're doing is we're supporting about 20 other organizations. Has anyone heard of Voces de la Frontera, the leading immigrant rights group in the state? They have a goal to reach 23,000 people, Latinx and other pro-immigrant supporters between now and November 2020, for example. Anyone heard of Wisdom, the network of people involved? They have a goal of another 20,000. Do you see how we might get to 200,000 if we, different, now they're not all just focused on gerrymandering, but we could do it.
So on your website, will you list all of the organizations that are working with you?
On the Wisconsin Voices website, we do have a list of our organizations.
So the
Wisconsin Voices.
So,
Miss Carlene, who will be back in touch. We'll be back in touch on questions like that.
So, did you tell them about me?
I did. Oh, I just announced this.
So you got the sneak, right?
Sneak peek.
Tell it at the end.
Oh, the big announcement, big reveal.
The big reveal.
You're right. I let it loose. Shh. I let it loose here. Okay, timer's up. All right, well, you can keep working if you need to. Okay, deep breath. How'd that feel? How'd it feel? Easy? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean to be a naysayer in any way. I really love your group, love what you're doing, but I don't feel comfortable giving you the names of people without asking them.
Yeah.
So that, yeah.
And we can talk more about what we do is we track your information, who you are as a leader, and then we just track, what we don't want to do is have the same, I don't want to double count these people. So no way do we reach out to this folks. We only reach out to you all. And then we just try to say, hey, this is coming up, can you talk to your people? What we do is we try to make sure there's not tons of duplication. Like if you have the same 20 people as the person behind you, we'll be like, hey, you've got this, there's this many duplicates. So that's what we do track, is just duplication. But we can follow up if you have any questions on that.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. I want to now pair up with someone, and we're going to do a little try this on. We're going to try this on. The people, what was your name? Was it? Zena. Okay, so I'd love for you to pick the person that you had a little hesitation about. They're like, for whatever reason. And you're like, let's just practice that conversation. What could a conversation look like? And we call them calls to action. So in this stage of the campaign, we're really trying to get more legislators to sign on to this bill. We got a lot of Democrats, and we got 5 Republicans to sign on. We think we will hit a turning point if we get to about 12, right? We think that'll really disrupt, that'll really tell the leadership, whoa, we're gonna have to think twice. We have this many people actually commit to the values and the specifics of fair maps. It might be 15, but we think we need to get about double or a little bit more than double of what we have now. So a call to action would be, the number one thing we've heard from legislators and people who work at the Capitol is the physical calls to their office is by far, it takes their staff time up. They do record that. When there's unique constituents calling them all on the particular issue, there's more than 6 at a time, ideally they really start to pay attention. But that's what we've heard consistently is the most effective way to reach is the physical call where staff, would you agree?
Yeah,
Senator Smith? Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you have any other insight?
those personal phone calls mean a lot more than a form letter.
Yeah, than a form letter.
What
And
about email?
what about
Same
emails?
thing with emails, if it's personal, it makes a lot more difference than just a form email.
Right, now, if
Okay.
it's your own personal email
Yeah.
to the office,
Yeah. So let's use that as an example. We could do other things, like we'd like to have legislators and candidates do in-district meetings, meaning, will you come to this coffee shop? There's going to be 10 constituents here, and we really want to talk to you about this. We want to organize things like that, and you're going to come up with other creative ideas. But let's try this on. So I want you to pick a person on your list. Everyone pick a person. Cool. And now everyone, I need you to find a friend in the room that person is going to pretend to be the person you picked on the list. So everyone pair up. We're going to do a pair. Everyone find a friend here.
Sure.
We have a three. We got a three. Is anyone in the back three? We got a three up here. Yes. Could someone come in right here? Do a pair.
We can be friends. Or I can go with her.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we still got a three.
Sorry.
Does anyone else need a? I can go with. Okay.
Are you
So then,
two gonna be
if you don't know each other,
Okay, I guess
introduce
we
yourself.
All right.
And I got you. Okay, now just your attention one more time. Sorry, I'm gonna quick walk you through this and then you'll do it. One is you're gonna like get to know each other, but then say, okay, you're gonna be my Aunt Sue. She lives in Wood County, but why didn't she come to this fair in Maps Country? I should have had a conversation with her. Okay, so then step one, connect how you would normally connect, or and then there's this idea of listening. So, empathetic active listening. Does anyone know what empathetic listening is? Yeah, what is that? What is empathetic listening?
You repeat some of the same things back to them.
Yeah,
And you agree on something that you,
Yeah. So this idea we want to pivot to talking of just like actually just having an educational sharing why you care about. Maybe you can share why you went what you did today. And so here's an example of how to start this. So I've been thinking a lot about fair maps and ending gerrymandering because it really matters to how funded or not funded Milwaukee Public Schools are. I really believe that. And my kids are going to start Milwaukee Public Education soon, and I want those schools to be better before Anton starts 4K. And so, I don't see that happening unless we have an end to gerrymandering. Have you ever heard of gerrymandering? Do you know what that is? Or have you heard of that, or fair maps? Just start there. Or you can go deeper, depending on your person. If you know they're already there and you want to take it a step further, try on another question. But then actually see what they say. And then some tips is asking open, and can you explain what you mean? Tell me more about that. If they said something, getting someone to actually articulate for themselves and that you talk at them is actually the best way. That's how we mostly need to convince ourselves to do stuff, right? Someone else can't go to the gym for me. I have to convince myself and get myself to the gym, right? It's just like taking action politically or voting. And then repeat it back. Yeah, I heard you say this. People want to be heard and need to be heard. Can you actually hear them and not just think about the next thing you're going to say? So we're going to try that. This is also just how to be a good human, by the way. This is like organizing 101, but like just being a good friend. So try that. Okay, then after that, personal appeal. You can see how it goes from there, but explain why this matters to you. I just had kids, so I bring them into the equation all the time because my whole mindset and world has changed since I had children. And I just think about their path. And their path in this state, is it a good one? What can I do to make sure it is? And how do the issues matter? And then ask them to commit. You can ask them to commit to vote in the spring election. You can ask them to commit. I think on this one, it's like, can I get you to call Representative Snyder? Can I get you to just give him a phone call? Here's the number. Can I get you to call him and then text me and tell me how it went? You left a message, or you connected with a staff person? Like, try and come up with a specific ask. And this is where your coach, if you're a captain, your coach will help you say, hey, we're really trying to get this specific thing done in this time frame of the campaign. And then like, who said, you actually will follow up. It's not a one-time transaction because like you're their friend or neighbor. So, hey, I'd love to be in conversation with you on this. So don't try and end the conversation like, I'll never talk to you again, right? The whole idea is like, even if it doesn't go as great as you want it, I'd love to continue to talk to you about this. Okay, so we're gonna practice this. Small talk. Pivot to gerrymandering. Try open-ended question. Listen. Be a good human. Personal appeal. Make a specific ask. Say, I'd love to continue. Okay, we're gonna do 10 minutes each. That's 5 minutes each before we wrap up, and then we're gonna see how it went. Yeah.
What the context you have active hostility about being confronted by doing something political?
Maybe then, okay, so I want to workshop that question. So if you're saying, I don't want to, if someone says, I don't want to be political at all, or that's too political for me, what do y'all could see as like preventing that or pivoting from that, or what are some things you can say? Has anyone ever gotten that? Okay. Okay. What could we do? Yeah.
One thing that I found really effective in talking to people with issues politics, you think, who are you voting for? I tell them, I'm voting for my kids and my grandkids.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it makes it very personal. I think for a lot of us, really, that's what it comes down to. I mean, what kind of world, what kind of community, what kind of future do we want for the people who are close to us?
Yeah. I would say maybe think about the questions you ask and even start even more personal for that person. Is just like just connecting with them, and I think that's why we're workshopping this. Is it's not, it's like there are triggers that some people have that they're like want to stay away from certain landmines, but they still, what are the values you do share? How could we draw on that and have a conversation about fairness and what does fairness look like in your local community? So maybe open it up there. What's your name?
I was David. We could even back it up and say, for example, well, what is it about politics that really turns you off? Why does it trigger you that way?
Yeah.
You could use that as a starting point.
Seeking to understand more on, that's right, and just listening really to understand. And if that's where you go, is to understand deeper what their resistance is, that might open the door for another conversation. Okay, we're gonna try this on and then we're gonna hear so much. So I want say who's the first person who's gonna be the captain, and the next person who the linebacker is. And let's do a 5-minute conversation, okay? And then we'll switch.
I'm really pleased to be with all of you. I'm not pleased to be with Gerry Goyke. I'm a Republican, he's a Democrat, so that's a big no-no for me. I'm a moderate Republican, by the way. Don't get confused with some of the people that But the main thing I don't like about Gerry is that he's a thief. He and I served in the legislature at the same time back in the 70s and 80s. And I had 2 legislative aides that you'll recognize. They were both college students at UW-Madison. One of my legislative aides was Brian Rood, moderate Republican senator eventually from La Crosse, the La Crosse area. He was from Coon Valley. The other legislative aide that I had in the office at the same time was a guy by the name of Dale Schultz. Okay, most of you know Dale Schultz. He represented for many years southwestern Wisconsin as a moderate Republican. Well, both of them were in my office at the same time, my 2 legislative aides. Dale came up to me one day and he said, hey, I read about this story about a bill that passed the New York legislature, and I think it's a really great idea. And I read the article and I said, yeah, that is. Let's get a bill drafted. So we got a bill drafted on this issue, introduced it into the Senate. It went to the Senate Transportation Committee that Gerry Goyke was chairman of. The Democrats were in the majority at the time. Gerry was chairman of the Transportation Committee. This was a transportation-related bill. And 3 days later, what does Gerry do? he introduces the same bill. And I looked at the bill. Well, this is my bill. The same wording, identical bill. So there was my Republican bill introduced first, and his Democrat bill introduced second. The Democrats were in control of the Senate. Guess which bill got passed into law? Gary's bill. So you're going to be using the law that Gary and I worked on sometime today or this weekend. So when you run into this law, or you use this law this weekend, thank Dan Thino. Not that Gary Joyce. And the law is right turn on red. Actually, Gary and I cooperated. I got to be a co-sponsor of his bill, and we worked together to make it pass. But that's just a little side story. Democrats and Republicans used to work together. Can you believe that? They used to work together.
So what happened?
Gerrymandering. The polarization of the state, the polarization of the nation can be traced largely back to gerrymandering. And in Wisconsin, we have the most gerrymandered state in the union. Republicans spent $2 million of taxpayer money to have a bunch of attorneys draw up the lines. They created 2/3 of the districts of the state legislature either leaning Republican or solid Republican. Guess what? 2/3 of the legislature is Republican. It was by design. It was by design. And when Gary and I were in the legislature together, I think the assembly for a while was Republican and the Senate was Democrat. Gary and I could argue back and forth on issues on the floor, but didn't go out to dinner at night. We didn't hate each other. I'm not sure if the Democrats and Republicans in Madison even talk to each other anymore because of the polarization. And what has happened because of the gerrymandering of legislative districts is that you have very strong Republican districts and very strong Democrat districts. The very strong Republican districts tend to elect very strongly conservative Republicans. The very strongly Democrat districts tend to elect very strongly liberal Democrats. Oh, and those very strongly conservative Republicans and very liberal Democrats get together in Madison or Washington, they have nothing to talk about. They don't even want to talk to each other. They hate each other. They are poles apart. That's where you get the word polarization. And there's an old saying that politics is the art of compromise. And right now, with gerrymandering in Wisconsin and many other states, polarization is to the point where there are no compromises. And by the way, this isn't a Republican issue. We can blame the Republicans in Wisconsin, but if I was talking to a group in Illinois or Maryland, I'd be talking to a lot of Democrats who are saying, or a lot of Republicans saying, we got to get rid of gerrymandering. So it's a bipartisan issue, and it deserves a bipartisan solution. But in my estimation, we've tried the court route. We didn't get as far as we wanted. The Supreme Court came down and said, federal courts, stay out of it, essentially. So we have to do a grassroots approach. In my intro, let me just say that I served four terms in the state senate from northwestern Wisconsin, served 2 terms as mayor of Ashland up on Lake Superior, and served Governor Thompson as a state agency administrator in the Department of Administration and the Department of Revenue. I currently live in Green Bay. I'm retired. A lot of times people say I'm retarded because I'm involved in so many things, not retired. But I do a lot of volunteer work. I'm on the Green Bay Traffic Commission. I'm chairman of the Green Bay Neighborhood Leadership Council. which is the umbrella organization of all neighborhood associations in the city. I'm advisor to many campaigns, many local campaigns for local office and for the state legislature, both Republican and Democrat. I have a new book that came out. You all, if you're running for office, winning local elections, $14.95, Amazon.com. That's the only commercial I'm allowed to say today. But this took me 10 years to, and by the way, Gary, this is going to be your book. I thank you. I'll sign it later because when it hits the bestseller list, it's going to be worth thousands of dollars. And I'm involved in this issue for the past 3 years. I've been going around the state on behalf of the Fair Elections Project, talking to League of Women Voters, talking to Rotary Clubs, talking to garden clubs, talking to university groups, because polarization of the political process is killing our democracy. And I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, when we don't have the ability to talk to one another, to cooperate and to compromise for the good of our country, for the good of our state, we are in trouble. This is the #1 issue in the country right now. We can talk about environmental issues, we can talk about road repairs, we can talk about a lot of issues. We've got to solve this issue. This is the most important issue of our democracy. Thank you.
This panel is called Lobbying Your Legislators, but I'm going to rename my portion as the power of a Republican legislator's constituent. How many of you are constituents of a Republican legislator? This is for you. My name is Laura Gottlieb, and I am not a Republican legislator's constituent. I'm a member of a group called TAR, which stands for Tuesday Action and Resistance, and is loosely affiliated with Indivisible Madison. 12 to 15 of us retired people meet almost every Tuesday afternoon at a coffee shop a half a block from the Capitol. And among the many other things we do, we take advantage of our location in Madison to visit legislators in the Capitol. Apart from donating to a legislator's campaign, visiting legislators is supposed to be the most effective way for citizens to influence them, because visiting takes a fair amount of time and effort, and is an indication of the strength of a constituent's passion about a particular project. I can't really, I'll try to speak.
Can you move up more toward the center, maybe?
Here?
Oh, maybe. Just move up in front of your table so you're a little closer.
Emily,
there you go. That'll probably help.
Okay. Signing petitions, writing emails, sending a personal letter, visiting, in reverse order. These are the chief methods of trying to influence a legislator. Can you hear me better now?
That's better, yeah.
Okay. In the past, we set up appointments with legislators and visited them for 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how much time they had available to spend with us. We asked them questions about their stances on legislation, the chances that legislation would be passed, how we could help them pass the legislation. Often we would arrive and find that the legislator had been called to the floor or to a committee meeting, and we would meet with a legislative aide instead. As complete novices at visiting legislative offices, we were surprised to find that the aides were often more knowledgeable about the legislation than the legislators, and also more candid about how things really worked in the Capitol. This is not surprising, since some of the aides have actually worked in the Capitol a lot longer than the legislators, and working with constituents and knowing about legislation are major parts of their job, and we learned a lot from them. Anyway, being from Madison, where we were represented exclusively by Democrats, we had trouble making appointments with Republican legislators. Most would tell us that they only make appointments with their constituents. Why did we let us speak to Republicans? Well, because in case you hadn't noticed, they're the ones with the power in the state. Don't get me wrong, we enjoyed visiting many Democratic legislators and learned a great deal from them, but for the moment anyway, Republicans are the ones with all the influence. Here's one of the most important things we learned from those early visits. If a legislator gets more than 3 contacts on a particular day, in a single day, that's a lot, and they take notice. 3 contacts a day. Think about that. How hard is it to arrange for a group of friends or fellow activists to each call their assembly representative once a week to ask them to sponsor Assembly Bill 303, the bill that would institute a fair way to draw redistricting maps in 2021? Jane, Judy, and Tom can call on Monday with their own ask in their own words. Bill, Matt, and Lakeisha could call on Tuesday. Melanie, Frank, and Jorge could call on Wednesday. You get the idea. Or how long does it take for the same group to schedule 3 people to write an email a day on the same subject to their legislator? It just takes a little time to set up a group schedule and a small commitment to follow through. Because Madisonians are limited in our influence on Republicans, we decided to identify grassroots groups like our own around the state and link them to their legislators through a database. With the database, you can look up legislators' names and identify the grassroots groups in their districts and their leaders' contact info. If a particular legislator needs some prompting about a particular issue, it's possible to alert those groups' leaders to call, write, or visit them. It's possible to organize a constituents meeting with their legislator because we know how to reach the activist constituents in their districts. It's possible to identify multiple grassroots groups who share the same legislator so they can join together for pressure and action. Because that's what lobbying is, trying to influence, persuade, or pressure an elected official to do the bidding of their constituents. Let me insert a brief commercial here. Following this panel, please go to the Indivisible Madison TAR table out in the lobby and see if your grassroots group is listed on our database. If it is not, please add it along with the contact information for your leader. If your group participates in the database, you will get a copy of it and the contact information for your own uses. It's a way of funneling and magnifying our widely separated voices around the state, sharing info and support and pressuring our legislators. This summer and fall, TAR members decided to visit legislators in a different way. We decided that instead of making appointments to visit legislators, we would drop in on all 132 of their offices with these specific requests and invitations. What is the legislator's position on nonpartisan redistricting? Why? Would the legislator co-sponsor the bills for nonpartisan redistricting that are currently languishing in committee? Were they aware of how many counties in their districts have passed fair maps resolutions or referenda? There are very few legislative districts that have not, where some counties have not passed legislation or resolutions, referenda. Would they or their aides attend this fair map summit? Dropping in on legislative offices meant that we could actually talk with Republicans. Of course, many of the legislators were not there, and some of their aides were brand new or in a rush, but many of our conversations with staffers and legislators were useful and interesting. And most amazingly, shortly after our visits, a Republican legislator, Representative Mursaw, signed on as a co-sponsor of AB 303. We wouldn't be so presumptuous as to say that our visit was the sole reason he became a co-sponsor, but we liked both the decision he made and the timing of it. Another commercial break here. We have compiled a list of the legislators and staffers' responses to our questions about where they stand on nonpartisan redistricting and why. And you can find those answers in alphabetical order by legislator's name in binders on the Indivisible Madison TAR table in the lobby. Please take a look at what your legislator or staffer said. Spoiler alert. We heard over and over again on our drop-in visits that legislators are not hearing from their constituents about nonpartisan redistricting. In view of so many other statewide issues that might seem to be more important, water quality, family farm closures, health care and Medicaid expansion, road conditions, CAFOs, public schools, nonpartisan redistricting might not be at the top of most people's lists of concerns. But all of those issues and many more are affected by the fact that district maps were drawn up by lawyers in secret in 2011 for the purpose of ensuring that the Republican Party would dominate Wisconsin politics until the next census or beyond. With the new census coming on April 1st, 2020, and the chance to draw fairer maps in 2021, we need to make nonpartisan redistricting the major issue we pester Republican legislators about. Make the Assembly Committee on Campaigns and Elections hold hearings on the bill. Make the committee bring it to the floor. Make the legislature vote on it. Make every single legislator, Republican or Democrat, running for election or re-election, pledge to support fair maps in 2021. A final question we asked on our drop-in visits was, could we make an appointment with the legislator, him or herself, at some later time and return with his or her constituents? Almost all of the legislators said we could. So those of you with Republican legislators have a power that we do not have in Madison. We have convenient access to the Capitol, but the Republican legislators will not see us. They will see you. So we'd like to encourage you to visit your legislator in Madison to ask them to co-sponsor fair maps legislation. If you make an appointment with them, we'll be happy to go with you for moral support. We're retired. We'll also be happy to help you with facts, arguments, maps, and statistics. We'll even put you up in our homes for the night. If you can't come to Madison, try to arrange an appointment with them in your district. Try to arrange a meeting between them and local elected officials, including county board members, officials on municipal boards, and town and county councils, town and village councils, many of whom already understand the problems gerrymandering has brought their communities. Try to hold town halls. The Fair Maps Coalition will help you organize one. There's a handy toolkit of information about gerrymandering and fair maps online that the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign put together so that you can be prepared. So let me close with some tips from Tar's experience in visiting legislators for the past 2 or 3 years, and some of these tips come from Harry. Don't be intimidated by the thought of visiting your legislator. Remember that it is your right as a Wisconsin citizen to visit him or her. Legislators are public servants whose salary is paid by you, the Wisconsin taxpayer. You are not bothering them when you are trying to persuade them to support your cause. You are helping them learn what's important to Wisconsinites and persuading them to do what's right for the communities they represent. Go with a small group for moral support. Practice before you go. Do some homework on their lives, political positions, and legislation before you go. When you get there, when you meet them, be polite but firm, treat them with respect, call them senator or representative, shake hands with them, meet their eyes, introduce yourselves briefly, thank them for meeting with you. If possible, thank them for something they've done. Limit yourself to the time they have allotted for the visit. Ask in advance, how long do we have? Have a specific request in mind. Make it simple and concrete. Please join the 5 other Republicans who are co-sponsoring AB 303. If you have a brief story about how gerrymandering is harming your community or your district, tell it. Stories are effective and memorable. Marshal your arguments. Know what likely counter arguments may come up and be ready to argue politely against them. Deliver letters from fellow constituents if possible. Suggest that they poll their constituents about fair maps in their legislative newsletter, as Representative Mursaw did. 78% of his constituents responded that they wanted to end gerrymandering. Finally, thank the legislator for his or her time and follow up with a thank you email. Remember, those of you with Republican legislators have the power to make non-partisan redistricting a reality in 2021.
Good morning, everybody. Dan Dino, yes. So this is a takeaway item, I think, from the conference. I am on the host committee as an advisor to the convention. And the young man that has started this, his name is Alex Lasry. Alex Lasry is vice president of the Milwaukee Bucks. He's a former staffer in the White House for Barack Obama. When the Bucks came to Milwaukee, and this is a very controversial issue and not everybody will agree on it, but they are doing one thing right. They have hired people from the neighborhoods surrounding the arena. Number 2, they are starting everybody at $15 an hour, and they are getting close to there are 2,700 employees right now, and they are training people in upward jumps. So he is really one of the instigators, and it's obviously good for them to have a convention be located there. because of everything that's happened nationally and how Trump has been so involved, just think of how the European press looks at this. The press are descending on Wisconsin in July. The hotel people are saying that, so the Texas delegation itself is 1,400 people. There isn't a hotel in Wisconsin. So they are all going to be in Chicago. They all want to be in the same hotel. They don't want to be in 3 hotels. But the press is all, the Madison hotels are where all the press are going to be. So the Park Hotel, the Concourse Hotel, the New Indigo Hotel, everything is pretty much booked. I think it's a good idea for you to think of ways to talk to the press as part about fair maps and about this issue. With what has happened in the Supreme Court in our state and at the Supreme Court in Washington, our national Supreme Court, the issue is hot and people are writing about these things. Secondly, there are going to be a series of events very, very soon. I do a dinner in Neenah called Valley Victory, which is designed for the Fox River Valley, and we are inviting the presidential candidates to come in, setting up a table, making this national media be aware that this issue is a big issue, and getting them to talk about it as well is for you a strategy item that you can easily, inexpensively, and you are all creative enough and dedicated enough that, especially your group downtown, she could go to every hotel. And indirectly, that gets to legislators because they get a news service. And so in their offices, they'll get the newspaper clippings. And it's a very indirect way to lobby about this issue and make it kind of a fun. Like, here's Sarah Boyd out in Portage talking to people about this issue. So those are some practical things that I wanted to bring up. I think you're also very good at forming coalitions. I know that even for today's summit, that a lot of people work together on that. I am a big believer in coalition building and keep reaching out. Specifically, here are some legislative targets to go after, other than the 5 that you have. Number 1, Jim Ott. Do any of you know him? I know one lady here that knows him pretty well. So he's an older gentleman, former weathercaster. The rumor on the street is he is not going to run. That's a rumor. But it's a district that's 1/3 of Alberta Darling's district. It's the North Shore of Milwaukee up into Mequon and Deansville. I think that would be a top target district in terms of awareness of the candidates in your cards. Second district, Dan Knodel. So go one district over, a beautifully gerrymandered district if there ever was one. Take some of the black people in Milwaukee and put them up with Mequon and then go up to West Bend. You don't want all those people voting together, so you create a very gerrymandered district. Rumor is it if Alberta Darling does not run, that Mr. Knodel would run for the Senate. Mr. Knodel has a candidate against him right now. Her name is Emily Segrist. She is a dynamite candidate. I mean, I've just talked about power. And she cares about this issue and is not afraid to talk about it. You don't have to, you're not making endorsements, but supporting people, I don't mean financially supporting, emotionally supporting and encouraging people is so, so important. Scott Krug from the town of Rome, Wisconsin Rapids, the 72nd Assembly District. Hi, is he yours?
Yes, sir.
Oh, Saratoga, here we come.
We beat him.
Pardon me?
We beat him on the Saratoga thing.
You did. I love that issue. It's such an important issue. So he is sort of the Tweedledum, Tweedledee type personality of the, sorry.
No, you're not telling us anything new, sir.
No, I know. But that district is, people feel the gerrymander in that district. I was with the mayor of Wisconsin Rapids, Zach Blurink. His uncle is here, by the way. Dad, his uncle's a legislator. That area feels disjointed. The assembly district that used to be Amy Sue Blurink's district is split into 5 counties, and they're just townships of each county. There's they didn't want any big cities, so you'll notice like in Columbia County, well, you don't put Portage in there, you don't put Forest in there, you just go around these cities, but you take one little block of them out. Very cleverly done. The open NENA district, as I mentioned, Scott Allen from Waukesha County. Very interesting guy. There could be a religious good approach there. Jesse Rodriguez from Oak Creek in South Milwaukee. These are all things that I have heard in the building about people who have softened on this issue. There have been press conferences on those. So those are my little tips on just talking about some of those practical things. And please follow this, and I think most of you are pretty well aware of the do's and don'ts. I would add a couple of things to it. One, use the fax machines if you're not getting through on the phone. And secondly, if you're sending a letter to the legislators, copy the staff. So when you go to the legislators page, it will list the staff people. Sometimes there are 6 of them, right? Like if you're boss, there are 17. There's 17 full-time staff. And send it all, copy them all. Emails are cheap. And that way, the office gets it. And if it goes just to the legislators, you'll get these forms back saying, thank you very much for contacting us. And you get it in 10 seconds, right? But from the staff, you don't get those, do you? The staff has to look through those to do. Dan used to have, and I saw you in session, so Dan would walk in and he'd have Assembly Bill 303. And he'd walk in and sit down. The staff put all the letters in the bill file. So he would open it up and all the letters of for and against the bill were in there. They don't do that anymore. So, not as much. Okay, so those are some practical things, and thank you for being kind to me. Yeah.
I always am the person who asks the question, but aside from the gerrymandered maps, I think the next issue is Citizens United. I think they go and
Oh, they do, yes.
and money in politics.
That's a very good point.
And I think that's another reason why it's become so divided, because one party has all the money, and you know, even in our area, $450,000 from Betsy DeVos's organization to defeat a Democrat. That has happened twice in the Wausau area.
Yep.
I mean,
Right.
and this person could raise maybe $100,000, but $450,000 from one organization. And it was all, the ads were just full of lies, the flyers full of lies.
Yeah, there's a multitude of issues that relate to one another that cause an avalanche eventually, and that's the position that we're in right now. Gerrymandering, too much money in the campaigns, too many special interest groups out there. I really compliment Gary in going over some of the behind-the-scenes things that are going on, because I think there are a number of cracks occurring. I know a lot of Republican people that I know are very upset with what's happening. Well, you saw this past Tuesday in Virginia, where the traditional Republican suburbs of some of the larger cities in Virginia, they went Democrat. And so there are some cracks. There are some thinking Republicans out there that are very disgusted with too much money, too much gerrymandering, too much polarization. And I think it's come to a head, especially in a state like Wisconsin, where there's a lot of people out here, Republican and Democrat, that are saying enough is enough. We are afraid of what the future brings. We are disgusted with what is currently happening in Madison.
I was encouraged last legislative session, one of the first bills introduced was a bill to weaken the open records law.
Yeah.
But within a matter of hours, there was a total 180 on that bill, because they heard from a lot of people and they decided to abandon that change.
Let me add on just a couple things, because I know we're running out of time. A couple things into what Gary has said in his excellent presentation. Just a couple practical things about communicating with legislators. Always be respectful. Always be respectful. There's 5.7, get my tongue working, 5.7 million people in Wisconsin. There's only 33 senators. So 33 senators, that's a high school classroom. There's more than 33 people probably in this room right now. And those people are special. For whatever reason, you might not agree with them, but they have support back home. Whether it's gerrymandered or not, they have support back home. Give them respect, because if you don't, they're not going to pay attention to you. Try to personalize your communications with them. For gosh sakes, don't knock on their home door. Don't do that. There are people to it. When they're back from Madison on the weekend, they're with their kids, they're in their gardens, they really don't want to be disturbed, and they need some downtime. Try not to call them at home. The best thing to do is to call their offices. If you can't get a hold of the legislator, talk to the staff person, set up a meeting. Maybe you meet for coffee some afternoon. That's much more preferable than knocking on the door of the state legislature. Communication-wise, emails are okay. Sometimes you have to use them. I don't think they're that effective. But legislators' aides do keep track of how many emails come in for and against an issue. Form letters are not really good. If you are sending out, I know we have some postcards here to send to legislators or to hand out. Those are fine, but put a personal note on it. Say, dear Senator, I really appreciate your support on this issue. Always try to personalize things. The best way to communicate with legislators is for a personal letter to go to that individual, especially handwritten. If you have a one-page handwritten from the heart correspondence with a legislator, that's going to have a lot of impact. And that a letter like that will probably...
in the election coming up, there are no statewide elections in November.
Right.
It is Congress, legislature. So the legislative issues are going to be dominant in certain regions of the state, right? So there is no Secretary of State, no Doug LaFollette, no Sarah Godlewski, no Tammy Baldwin, no anybody running on a statewide basis. The only case for election will be the Supreme Court in April. That'll be over with. So there is no statewide campaign except for the president, statewide, and then the legislative races will emerge as such hot commodities politically this year. That's why this issue is still going to be front and center.
And keep asking in public forums. There's always candidate forums. You know, we've got elections coming up. All these candidate forums in every district in Wisconsin. Go to the forums. Stand up and ask the question, where do you stand on fair maps? You know, put the pressure.
Sometimes asking for help from the legislature is a lot more effective than making a demand.
Yep.
And so I think most legislators want to feel like they're being helpful.
Yeah.
And so if you ask them, tell them you need their help, they're more likely to respond than if you say, you got to do this.
Yeah. And that gets back to treating with respect. Never threaten a legislator. That is the worst thing. If you don't vote for this bill, I'm going to get you in the next election. That just isn't going to work.
I've heard people say, though, that when they call to make an appointment to talk to their legislator, you know how you get that questions about what from the staffers, what is it you want to talk about and stuff, that some people have a difficult time even getting an appointment with their legislator these days because they don't need to talk to you if you want to end gerrymandering.
Okay, one of the things that I would encourage you to do, most of you in this room are Democrat or Democrat leaning, right? Okay, be honest. If I was talking to a group on the same issue in Illinois, most of you would be Republican or Republican leaning. Try to recruit some Republicans to help you out. it is going to be much more effective for a person that contributed to the Republican candidate in your district who is a Republican, if that person makes the contact, than if the major fundraiser for the Democrat candidate in the last election makes the contact.
But I'm still
So
the
recruit some
constituent.
Republicans.
I'm the constituent. And he is, that person, he or she is supposed to be listening to what I...
Okay, you're bringing up an interesting point. Gary, you might want to respond to this too. What's happened with gerrymandering is that if you have very strong Republican districts, they don't have to pay attention to you. If they know that you're a Democrat in particular, they aren't worried about you, they aren't worried about your vote.
I know, and so what do you do when you can't get an appointment? Just because they know where you're coming from.
You recruit a Republican to make the contact, and you keep pressuring that legislator until that person sits down and talks to you. If you put enough pressure on, they're going to eventually say, I've got to sit down and talk to these people because they're barking at my heels and I'm tired of listening to them.
If I could add one thing to that. So I'm a conservative. Any other conservatives here? Because I'm the only one, right? So, with the, but the other thing is, if not just recruiting a Republican or a conservative, you can recruit a Republican who is donated to that candidate. That tends to get you more help.
Another group that is really instrumental in getting to a legislator, get a hold of your local elected officials. Get a hold of your mayor, get a hold of the town supervisor or the president of the county board. Get them on board to set up some meetings. That's very effective. Just be creative. Sometimes being creative you can do it. Yeah, Bill.
Just wanted to know if Gary and all your little corridor conversations, you've heard anything about primaries against the 5 Republican legislators who have signed on.
The only one I heard is that was most nervous is Travis Trinnell. Right now, there is a kerfuffle about the next secretary to be voted out, and that is the Secretary of Tourism. Her name is Sarah Lee, and she's from Whitefish Bay. She's the Secretary of Tourism. Very good appointment. The woman who was the Chamber of Commerce Executive Director in Platteville felt slighted over a vote taken on the board, and so she's filed some open meeting complaints, and they are now going to do to that secretary what they did to the Ag Secretary, and transportation will be after that. So Travis has to be very careful. He's very moderate. He did not vote for Scott Walker's first budget, if you remember. And I think that would be one I would worry about. Voss is a very good counter. He counts very, very carefully. So if he's got anywhere near 54, 55, the rest of the world doesn't matter. And so that's why that's why gerrymandering is so important with them. He cannot have a fair field, period. They are afraid of a fair fight.
A couple more questions and then we're going to have to call it quits.
What do you think about the role of independents? Can you speak up so we can hear? What do you think about the roles of independents coming to the constituent? Because, I'm very open-minded. I would vote for a sensible Republican. I don't have this problem with that, but I'm finding it increasingly difficult becoming like an enabler.
Please speak louder, or we can't hear you at all.
We're talking about how modern Republicans are becoming an endangered species, and as an independent voter, I'm very open-minded. I would vote for anyone that's a reasonable candidate. I don't really care about their party. How does that kind of person, what kind of leverage can you exert if you're very clear on that fact and you're saying,
make that fact clear.
I'm the swing voter. I don't vote party line.
Make the legislator aware of that, because that is a person that the legislator will pay attention to.
Do you think that's fairly, even in a gerrymandered situation, yes. Do you think that's still relevant?
Yes.
Well, there's a cleansing going on, as you can tell, right? So I mentioned 4 women who are former legislators. There's a cleansing going on that. There's a certain litmus test so that there are very few of those people that are going to look at it, and they don't need an independent voice, right? They don't care. The system is set up so that it's rigged, and it doesn't matter if you're independent or not. All I'm saying is that there's hope because internally this is not supportable forever, and there are cracks. So my message is to keep going every time there's a crack, to go in there and to keep working at it. You got 5 already. That is very significant. I would say this about bringing a Republican in or not. I would say the diversity of the group is more important. By that I mean different backgrounds or occupations tend to get a little bit more than the token coming in. They get this figured out, right? Or a group that would hire a Republican to go in, they don't care, right? They don't, honestly, they don't care. I can assure you of that. So those doors are only opened at a certain level for a certain amount of money. And we are not in league at that. I would say I would get, if it's a pastor, I'd get a city council member. If I'm a farmer, I would get a construction worker. I diversify the people coming in because that the legislator looks at, or different parts of the district.
One thing I found really effective, I went up to the legislature to talk about funding for public education, and I took 3 high school students from Oregon High School with me. And I found that the legislators were much more responsive and receptive with some students coming along than they were if I just walked in by myself.
They're very obvious. We're going to have to quit. Thanks.
Thank you.